A Girl with Blue Hair by Xylonex. Sienna was a girl who sat beside me in freshman English. She was a slender woman with angular but symmetrical facial features. She dyed her hair whatever color suited her mood. Despite spending half a semester sitting in close proximity with each other, we didn't really speak until she bummed a cigarette from me after a midterm exam. It so happened that we had a lot in common. We had been to a few of the same concerts and we liked the same bands. We spent the rest of the first semester of college chatting before and after class. She used me for free cigarettes and someone to block the wind. Winter break came and went, and I didn't expect to see her again. Friendships made in a smoking circle might last a lifetime, but as I found out, most of my smoking acquaintances were around for a semester at best. I was pleasantly surprised to see her waiting outside the faculty hall with a cigarette between her lips on the first day back to class. Her hair had been dyed 3 different shades of blue, and she was wearing purple lipstick that day. Before I could say a word, she pushed a cigarette in my direction and said, "Thanks for supporting my habit last semester. Join us." Sienna had been talking to a few girls that left within a minute of my arrival. We talked for a few minutes before class, and she was there before I made it back out. This led to another trivial conversation that ended with her saying, "Hey, there's a cool bar that lets undergrads in. They're having a concert tonight. $5 cover. Wanna come?" Now, I wasn't the most popular guy in high school, and I'm not sure I'd ever have imagined a girl like this asking me out prior to the event. I awkwardly said, sure. She jumped up, punched me on the shoulder, and said, "Meet me at the Olive around 8. She scampered off, and I relaxed a little. Judging by the playful punch and the distance between us, it was obvious she didn't have any romantic intentions. I showed up around 7:30 and she strolled in around 8:20. I don't exactly remember what band was playing, but I blame that on the alcohol. Sienna would occasionally walk past the bar and guys would offer to buy her drinks. She'd come back to the table a few minutes later and put her lipstick-stained drink out in front of me and say, "Drinks are on me." That was Sienna, playful and generous. I spent the rest of the night reaping the benefits of thirsty guys trying to drink from her fountain. The band played, we danced in the crowd. I ended up face down in my dorm room by the end of the night with a splitting headache and a newfound appreciation for tequila. The following day, Sienna was sitting in front of the faculty hall, snapping selfies and generally being herself. I asked, "What's with the photography?" She smiled ear to ear and said, "I saw a flyer for a modeling gig at the bar. I called the number last night and they told me to stop in this afternoon." I couldn't help but be excited for her. I said, "So where is this place?" She replied, "On the other side of town." "Hey, do you have a car?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. "Nope." She punched me in the arm and said, "Well, you mind giving me a ride? We can swing by Sarah's afterwards and she'll smoke us up." I wasn't doing anything important that afternoon, and I've never been one to turn down free pot, so I picked her up at 3 and drove her to this hotel at the edge of town. It was a Holiday Inn, and the photographer was meeting candidates in one of those conference rooms. There must have been 50 girls in the lobby. Each one of them was as stunning as the one before them in the line. Sienna frowned and said, "I'm never going to compete with these girls." I laughed and said, "Yeah, you're right. You don't stand a chance." She hugged me tight around the chest and said, "You think so?" I nodded, and she took her place in line. I stepped outside to grab some air, and I filled with my phone. About an hour had passed before she walked out of the conference room with a grin plastered across her face. She spoke with a tone halfway between a giggle and a shout, saying, "They hired me. I come back in a few days for a shoot." I replied, "Well, remember me when you're famous." She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek before skipping back to my car. We stopped by Sarah's house, and we spent the rest of the evening passing a bowl as we listened to dubstep and vegged out on the couch. I sobered up enough to drive back to campus a bit later, and we ended up at the Olive. Sienna mooched drinks from desperate guys, and I drank lipstick-stained glasses until I ended up walking her back to her dorm. As we neared the front door of her dorm, she turned around and said, "I have a confession." I looked down at her and said, "Yeah? What's that?" She looked up, her eyes glossy from a night of smoking and drinking, and said, "I liked kissing you on the cheek." She leaned in and I took a step back, saying, "If you feel this way in the morning, we can talk, but I don't want to kiss you for the first time when we're 3 sheets to the wind." She pouted for half a second before turning towards her door. After swiping her ID and opening the door, she turned back for a moment and said, "I've got my eye on you, boy." The next morning, I found myself sitting alone in a smoking area. It didn't surprise me that she was a no-show. I knew I was taking a risk by declining a kiss. I opted to distract myself before class by playing Candy Crush and listening to a playlist. I felt someone plop down next to me, and as I turned around to look, Sienna grabbed me by the face and planted a kiss directly on my lips. It was awkward, and I accidentally bit her lip. I wasn't expecting it, and I didn't exactly have any experience. She pulled away, and I said, "Sorry, I've never done that before." Sienna pulled back and said, "Wait, does this mean you've never done anything before?" I nodded, and she said, "Not bad. I love the bite. You're a natural." Within a minute, we had stepped inside the building and started making out on the stairway. I ended up being 5 minutes late to class. I ducked out 10 minutes early and skipped my next one to spend the rest of the day in Sienna's room, making out and listening to a Spotify playlist she had put together. The next 2 days were easily the happiest I had ever experienced in my life until that point. Friday came around, and her modeling gig was scheduled for 4 o'clock. I drove her up to the hotel, and she met the photographer at the desk. They went into the conference room, and about an hour later, she came out grinning and said, "So today was pretty simple. They took some headshots and a few different poses." I smiled and said, "That's great. Did they want you to come back?" She looked down towards the ground and said, Her head perked up into a smile, and she continued, "They want me back tomorrow." She showed me a $100 bill and said, "Let's go shopping." I spent the next hour browsing Route 21 as she picked out a few accessories and a couple cute shirts. The rest of the night was spent at Sarah's house, getting baked and listening to music. As I walked her back to her dorm, she said, "You can come up tonight if you want." I obliged, and we laid next to each other talking before I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning to an empty dorm room. A few moments later, Sienna burst in with a couple of trays from the cafeteria and said, "Hey, I was supposed to wake you up to breakfast in bed." She handed me a tray, and I devoured the bacon and eggs before she could get another word in edgewise. After breakfast, she stood up and took off her shirt. I averted my eyes, and she chuckled, saying, "Relax, you're my boyfriend. You get to see stuff like this." I turned to see her slender body and marveled at each contour. My eyes eventually drifted to a tattoo near her navel. It was a black outline of Hello Kitty. She pulled on a t-shirt and changed into a pair of jeans. She slipped on sneakers and said, "They wanted me in jeans and a t-shirt today." Meh. It's another $100, and Sarah has half an hour of that kush we were smoking last night. How about we pack a bag and head to the lake? I drove her to the hotel, and she walked out into the conference room. I stood outside smoking a cigarette. About an hour had passed, and she hadn't come out. After 2 hours, I asked the desk clerk about how long they usually took, and he said, "Who?" I said, "The photographers." He shook his head and said, "They only rented the room for Monday and Friday. No one has that room today." I walked in the conference room and it was empty. I walked to the rear, out the side of the door, to see the photographer standing next to a rundown pickup truck smoking a cigarette. I walked up and said, "Hey, have you seen Sienna?" He tossed his cigarette and said, "Who?" before getting in the truck and pulling out. Something felt off. I had every intention of getting in my car and following him, but by the time I had made it back to my car, he was already long gone. I felt this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I called the police. An officer had came out, but nothing much came of it. At one point he said, "Did it ever occur to you that she just wasn't that into you?" I still felt horrible, but there wasn't much I could do. I went to class the following Monday, but I never saw Sienna in the smoking section. A few weeks had passed, and I bumped into Sarah at the cafeteria. She leaned in and said, "Y'all still talk to Sienna? I haven't seen her in a few weeks." I broke down and told Sarah everything. Her expression shifted from one of concern to brooding anger. She scowled and said, "Fucking figures. A girl goes missing and the cops don't even want to bother with anything." Sarah and I spent the rest of the day going over the events with the photographer and looking them up online. Their Facebook page had been deleted. The phone number from the flyer went to a disconnected number. We took this to the police, and Sarah shouted at the desk clerk until the officer came out to speak with us. They took all the information and said they'd look into it. By the end of the semester, I had called back several times, and all I heard was she was officially listed as a missing person. 2 semesters later, I graduated with an associate's degree and moved on to a different school. I eventually dropped out of college and spent the next couple of years working random gigs before I ended up at the factory where I work now. Occasionally, I still pop into the local bar and catch a show. As chance would have it, I saw a random woman at the bar with blue hair dancing near the band. My heart skipped a beat. I rushed to the stage to get a look, only to feel my stomach churn on itself as the girl in front of me had a round face. That killed it for me. I went home early and pulled up a selfie Sienna had texted me several years before. I don't often think about her, but something has me really messed up lately. I got bored and lonely. Like most men on the internet, it led me to an area of the internet primarily for inspiring one-handed typing. As I browsed through various search terms, I came across a video thumbnail that piqued my interest. The girl in the video laid there, her dead eyes peering into the camera as 2 men stood over her talking in Russian. Her angular features and symmetrical face bore a flat effect. As the camera panned down, I saw a tattoo just above the navel. It was Hello Kitty. I forwarded the link to the video along with what I posted here to the FBI. I included my phone number. Part of me wants to hear back from them. Part of me wants them to tell me I'm crazy. Sienna laid there, waiting to be used by 2 random men speaking a foreign language. Nothing of the spark I had always seen in her eyes remained. As I write this, the one thing that repeats in my mind over and over is that I drove her to that appointment.